The desire to achieve is essentially based on comfort, pleasure, satisfaction, gratification. And what we are going to deal with this morning does not need any kind of effort at all. Because effort exists only when there's contradiction. Contradiction within.
The speaker is Krishnamurti, whose unorthodox and challenging approach to fundamental philosophical and religious questions has made him one of the more stimulating and authentic voices of our time. This is the 7th of 8 programs filmed with Krishnamurti in the Ojai Valley in California, and it represents the first time that Krishnamurti has allowed his talks to be filmed.
And it is these contradictory desires that bring about conflict. The wanting and not wanting. What is and what should be. The what is trying to conform to a pattern of what should be. And so there is always conflict. And apparently that's part of our daily existence. From getting up in the morning, going to the office, struggling, till we go back to bed, and from the moment we are born till we die, there is this constant effort and battle. And to make effort, to get rid of effort, is still further effort. The things that we're going to discuss this morning, as I said, needs no effort at all. What it needs is a total perception of the whole process of life. And to perceive this whole phenomena of life, one needs energy. And that energy is denied when there is this drive, this effort to achieve something. You know, it's only when the cup is empty that it can be filled. It's only when the mind and heart are totally empty then it can comprehend and it can live. But to be so completely empty is not a negative phenomenon. On the contrary, it is the highest form of intelligence. It's the highest form of love, to be so completely empty, so that there is not a scratch of memory, not a word, not a conclusion that distorts perception. And what we are going to discuss or talk over together this morning demands a quality of mind that has no fear of any kind. So one has first to understand fear. Because what we are going to discuss is this problem of death. And to understand this enormous problem which has faced man from the beginning of time, one has to be free of fear. so many forms of fear. Fear of darkness, fear of what somebody says, fear of being hurt, fear of insecurity, fear of loneliness, and the ultimate fear, which is death. Fear, in every form, is thought in action with regard to the past, through the present and to the future. I am afraid of what will happen. And I'm afraid of something I have done in the past which I want to cover up. So, thought, fear is the movement of time. And it's very important, if we would be free of fear, to understand this movement of time, which is essentially the process of thinking. The now, the actual living present, the now, is the result of yesterday and 1,000 yesterdays. So there is no actual now. And fear is this movement of time which is the product of thought. When I am confronted with something dangerous, immediately there is no fear. I act, either foolishly, ignorantly, but there is action. But give time, an interval, then thought comes into operation. Then I'm afraid. I'm sure each one of us has various kinds of fears. Take one of them, bring it out in the open, and look at it. And how you look at it matters immensely. First, do you look at it as though it was something outside of you, as something which is not you, but something which is placed outside? So, there is the observer, and fear is something outside of you. Right? So there is this duality, this contradiction. I am not afraid, but there is fear, which I must overcome. I must do something about that thing which I call fear. So the observer is different from the thing observed. And is there a difference? There is no difference if you examine. The observer is the observed. That is, the observer is the center of accumulated memory, experience, knowledge, information, and so on. The sensor, the observer. He or it is aware outside of himself something which he calls fear. And he is making constant effort to run away or translate or transcend or suppress that fear. The more the tension between the observer and the fact of fear, the greater the effort, the greater the desire to escape, to run away, to cover up. And if you cannot run away, one becomes neurotic. Because the tension becomes so intense. And to live in that intense darkness of fear is a state of neurosis. But as we said, when the observer is the observed, not an idea but the fact, then there is no effort at all. Because then there is no contradiction. I am fear. And what can I do? Please follow this. When the observer is the observed, and the observer has always acted as though the observed is something different from himself, then he could act. But when he realizes that the observer is the observed, all action ceases on his part. And therefore all effort. And therefore there is no fear at all. This requires a great deal of inward inquiry, inward observation, step by step without coming to any conclusion. And when there is no fear, because the observer is the thing which he has externalized as fear, of which he is himself, then this action which was positive, that is doing something about fear, then the observer is the observed in that state that's complete inaction. And that complete inaction is the highest form of action. Now, so there is no effort at all. It's only the dull mind, the mind that's committed, the mind that is achieving, not achieving, that is in constant battle, struggle, effort. And this effort, this struggle is considered the positive way of life. It is the most mischievous way of life. Let's proceed to examine this question of what is death. There are three things one has to understand: living, love, and death. They all go together. You cannot separate death from love and living. To us, living, as it is a torture, a misery, meaningless existence. The more clever, the more sensitive, the more intellectually, emotionally one is alive, it has no meaning at all. And seeing that it has no meaning, we invent a meaning. We project a meaning. And according to that meaning, try to live. And which is not living at all. So one has to understand what is living. And living is not this battle between human beings. It's not this battle of competition, of races, of ambition. Oh, and all the rest of it. I don't have to go into all the details of it. We all know what life is, the torture, the sorrow, the endless misery and confusion. And that's what we call living. And love, as we know, is hedged about with jealousy, with suspicion, aggression, violence. And so we don't know what that is either. And obviously we don't know what death is, because we are frightened of it. There is much deeper fact, deeper issue involved in death. That is, the psychological ending, the me, the accumulated experience as a human being, with all the knowledge, with all the accumulated information, every form of memory, treasured, cherished, and despised, put away, all that is the center, which is the me, the ego, the person. And it is that center, the psychological center, that one is afraid of losing. And that center is the result of time. And that center creates the space round itself, like all centers do. This microphone exists in space, and it creates a space round itself, which is fairly simple. And there is the center of me as the me, which has created a space round itself. And this, to most of us, is the losing of that center. Isn't it? The things that I have known, my family, my friends, all the things that I have accumulated, which is the known. The center is the known. And this is something of which I don't know at all. And what I'm frightened is losing the known, not of the unknown. And losing the known means I'm completely lonely. I'm completely alone in a void. And that's what I'm afraid of. Now, is it possible to end that center each day, not having accumulated, then giving it up, but to die to that center every day, every minute? That is, that center is the accumulation of experience, knowledge. And life is a process of experience, a challenge and a response. You have an experience, a pleasant or unpleasant experience, dangerous or pleasurable. And to receive that experience and understand it and die to it immediately, so that there is no memory or as a center which retains that experience. We often do this, naturally. But to be aware so intensely, without any choice, and to be aware so every experience is totally assimilated, understood, and dissolved. That requires a great deal of energy, which means attention. That is, to die every day to every pleasure, to every thought, to every form of accumulation. So that with the dying, the mind is made fresh and the heart renews itself, so that life doesn't become a torture. So, in dying every day to everything that we know, is to love. Otherwise one cannot love. Love is not something to be cultivated. Like humility, the moment you cultivate humility, it's a cloak of vanity. And it's only when you die to everything or every experience that you have had that you are living. So living is a movement, fresh, new, innocent, every minute of the day, fresh. And to die to the past is to live totally at an altogether a different dimension.
If I attend to a tree in the way that you describe, so that the observer is the observed, the tree is still there.
Of course, sir.
If I attend to my fear in the same way, won't my fear also still be there?
No, you see, first of all, I don't want to get rid of my fear. I want to understand it. To understand something, I must care for it. I must love it. I must be careful with it. And if I say I must get rid of it, I've already acted most foolishly. Because I have to understand the structure and the nature of fear. And to understand it, I must look at it. And I cannot look at it if I say if I want to get rid of it, or suppress it, or sublimate it. I must actually look at it, come into contact with it, not through a word, but with the fact, with what it actually is. How can the mind, which is so crowded, so everlastingly chattering, how can that mind be emptied? I'm afraid there is no way. Any method is the most impractical way That's why, sir, we said at the beginning, what is important is to listen. And to listen needs attention, care, a certain quality of affection in which there is communion. And then you'll find without an effort it is coming to be. So you see, sir, we are so used to being told what to do. We worship authority. And we have lost all capacities in the world, all intention to find things for ourselves. And in this, what we are talking about, there is no teacher, there is no method, there is no practice. There is only perception of what is, and when there is that perception, then the problem is resolved. Yeah.
Of what significance is hope and faith to living?
What significance is hope and faith to living? I hope you won't think me harsh if I say there is no significance at all. We've had hope. We've had faith. Faith in church, faith in politics, faith in leaders, faith in gurus. Because we've wanted to achieve a state of bliss, of happiness, and so on. And hope has nourished this faith. And when one observes through history, through our life, all that hope and faith have no meaning at all, because what is important is what we are, actually what we are, not what we think we are, or what we think we should be, but actually what is. If we know how to look at what is, that will bring about a tremendous transformation.
The talks and writings of Krishnamurti place him outside of any ordinary category, such as philosopher or religious leader. This has been the 7th in a series of 8 programs. The concluding program in the series is called The End of Conflict.
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.